last ever Genshin patch livestream in 2024 have just ended, and I've decided to look around the various corners of the internet to try and see what sort of features seem to be the more popular request when it comes to the small or even major features that the casual player base would want to see come into Genshin within the coming year. Some of these will also be my own personal suggestions, so feel free to give this an open thought. And like I said, these are features that are geared more towards the casual player, so if you're coming here expecting endgame and meta suggestions, then I'm afraid you're just gonna have to look someplace else. Without further ado, the name's Leafy, and welcome back to Let's Talk Slow About Games, Genshin Edition. Before I start, I want to preface this video by saying that the Genshin team has done a great job in maintaining the quality of this game, not only in terms of content, but also in terms of continuously improving its quality of life, and also continuously trying to add more features into the game. While there are big changes such as reducing the pity points of the weapon banner to just 1, artifact maker, and world boss respawn time changes, I'm also forever thankful for all the little tidbits that not many probably paid attention to, such as the increased inventory limits, quest focus modes, expedition redeployment, and many more. The rest of this list is just things that I think can help mostly casual players have an easier time. By any means, I do not mean to dismiss all the things that the devs have done throughout the year, and I certainly don't think that it's the end of the world if some of these don't end up becoming a thing in 2025. And not all of the ones I'll be presenting will be things that I think will be straight up good ideas, so I'm simply putting those ones in only for discussion's sake. Right, with that out of the way, let's go through some of the most popular ones that I can really just blast past, since there's really not much to discuss when it comes to these particular features. First, of course, is the good old having a dialogue or story skip button. Now, before you click off and comment that we don't really need it, let me tell you my perspective. Personally, I'm not one to really need this to become a thing when it comes to the main story, but when it comes to those daily quests that features lines of dialogue that really doesn't change no matter how many times you do that quest, I think it's just weird to want to have a way to skip that. And if having that skip feature means that people are gonna wanna skip the main story, then so be it, it's their loss. If they then complain about not getting or understanding the story when they had been willingly skipping it, then they are just idiots. For those of you who still wants to read the story or dialogue, people like myself, we can just ignore the skip feature. Honestly, I'm just thinking that at least that way, the people who's been very vocal about, oh, give us a skip button, can finally stop bitching about it if it does make its way into the game. Second, remove the goddamn watermark from the picture mode. Hoyo, my guy, you guys literally have one of the biggest gacha game in the current industry's existence, both in terms of market presence and just overall style recognition. I think people can now recognize that a screenshot came from Genshin without that giant watermark appearing in every picture we take. Third, is to remove the Adventurer Handbook's limit in displaying the enemies you're trying to farm. I never really understood why this was a thing. They did such a nice thing by adding the whole look for local specialty radar feature, but still haven't removed this old ass limit. It wouldn't render the online interactive map useless since people will still need it for puzzles, challenges, and all that, so I think this one's kind of long overdue. Now, the final ones that I'm going to really just blast past because I really don't have anything to say other than just to mention: 1. Artifact loadout, a proper one, and 2. 120 FPS for PC players. Okay, now let's talk about the more segmented features, starting with everything related to resin. Now, I don't really think that we should increase the cap, and we especially do not want to decrease the resin charging time, because I think the current rate is just about in that sweet spot where it allows people to comfortably stay out of the game between the days without having to be worried that their resin is going to cap, whilst also still having enough resin to do a bunch of stuff if you log in more frequently. However, I think the introduction of a reserve resin mechanic such as the ones that Starrail and Zenless have will overall be a beneficial feature to everyone. Players who had to stay away from the game for a while will have a decent amount of additional resin to catch up with, and the players who couldn't get back in time into the game before the resin caps can at least have a bit of assurance that the overflowing resin isn't going to just disappear to time. The resin changes that I personally would like to see more, however, is the ones that relate to condensed resin. Increasing the cap from 5 condensed is a great way to allow better freedom for players in regards to when they want to use their resin. Like some Redditors have said, having the cap be a significantly higher number can allow people who just straight up doesn't have the time to play in the weekdays to just spend 2 minutes going into the game, changing their resin into condensed, and then spending it all when they have ample free time to play on the weekends. That way, missing out on spending your resin during the weekdays won't be as detrimental since you can still technically use your resin instead of just capping it and being unable to craft more condensed because you already maxed out the inventory amount. There should still be a cap, mind you, just a value that's quite a bit bigger than just 5. The other change that I want to see is the ability to use condensed resin to collect world boss materials. At the moment, you're still stuck with only being able to use original resin for it, even though it uses the same amount as a single condensed resin would use. This might also be an issue that feels much more personal to me as an older player because I don't know about the rest of you, but sometimes you just log into the game, collect expeditions, check the dailies you need to do, and then turn all your resin into condensed because most of the things you are farming would use condensed resin instead. But then, in comes the rare moments where you actually just got a new character and you needed to farm their world boss materials, only to realize that habit had suddenly taken away all your resin into condensed form and you have no way of utilizing those for boss materials and you can't revert them back to original resin. Being able to use your condensed to collect it would be a godsend, honestly. I think it's fine to not have that feature for weeklies because of the awkward resin difference between the condensed and weekly collection resin, so just having the one for world boss materials would already be insanely great for me. Let's move on to the second segment now, which are the creature comfort features. The first one that I had seen a lot of requests for is to add a buff and skill timer onto the hotbar of our characters. I think the usefulness of this should be pretty evident. If you are in combat, then you can see how long you have left in the duration of the respective skills that you use, instead of having to eyeball it within rotation timings and such. Things like shield duration, off-field sub-DPS duration, and everything that needs a duration to keep track of really would be great to have readily seen atop of our character's health or something. And maybe in a more niche scenario like damage testing, then people can figure out how much time they have left before food buffs disappear or what it is that is afflicted upon your characters that would probably make your team a bit less efficient in whatever it is that you're trying to achieve. A feature that I'm sure can definitely help people play around their team just that bit more smoother. The second creature comfort feature would be the ability to use your dream solvents to switch weekly materials that are not within the same pool of materials of that weekly boss. I think having this restriction removed would not only make it easier for us to build the newer characters that have newer materials that we don't have yet, but it would also help in making so that all those child materials that I have rotting away in my inventory can actually find some use for once. People also ask for dream solvents to drop more frequently, and while I may not personally feel the need for this since I have 164 of them just laying there, and I barely had a time in the game where I actually used this thing regularly, maybe that's something to consider as well. Moving on to the third creature comfort, which also has connection to weeklies, is to change the way weekly boss attempts work. With the way most people casually farm in this game, there's a reason to suggest that they can just give us an overall weekly attempt limit, maybe something like 5 attempts or around that considering the amount of weekly bosses we have now. And then we can just, farm all those 5 attempts on any weekly boss we want. Maybe give the first 2 or 3 attempts the half-off discount from the resin use as we have now, and then the rest will just be the default 60. People can benefit a lot from being able to repeatedly farm one weekly boss, and considering the restriction on how dream solvents themselves work, this should be a nice way to make farming for the specific materials that you need become a lot easier. Creature comfort number 4. Don't start quests just by us walking near the quest trigger. 1. People don't always want to start the quest right then and there, and 2. This old classic thing still happens a bit more frequently than I think the devs thought. The last creature comfort, which is also one that still puzzles a lot of people, including me, is the artifact crashing system. I will be honest, I have no clue what exactly is the use of the star or favorite option that they recently added to the artifacts. Is it not just the same thing as locking your artifact in the first place? Now, for those of you who are saying, why not just salvage the ones that you don't lock? Well, that's fair, but sometimes, especially for people with donkey luck like me in rolling, we tend to keep a few of the pieces around just in case the ones that we wanted to roll initially didn't go to plan. Now, these pieces are not outright garbage, but they also do not look like they have any concrete feature, so we won't lock them in the first place, so we don't really want to throw it away just yet. Meanwhile, the trash button will just be reserved for your absolute horrid all-flat attack, defense, and HP ones. Another feature that would just be comfortable to have. Next up, we have the miscellaneous segment, where we will be talking about the more random features that might give the game a bit more life. Miscellaneous feature number 1, playable characters appearing in the overworld as NPCs. This one is pretty straightforward and I think a lot of people, have asked for this. Just like the way Zenless and Starrail have done, it would definitely make the world feel much livelier if we get to see our characters, who, a lot of them, have pretty distinct positions in their respective regions, show up around the map. I think doing the Starrail approach would be the best one, where all we need is one greeting line, preferably one that is unique to the action of meeting them in the overworld, and then the rest can just be normal voiceless dialogue. I think that's enough of a feature to make them feel present enough in the grand scheme of things. Or since they already do it for the teapot, maybe we can expect to actually have unique overworld voice dialogues? Who knows? On to number 2, actually being able to get more than one sanctifying elixir per patch. I know people are saying that they are also available from other sources like reputation levels and secret spaces, but seriously, only one per patch after clearing all the other sources essentially means you can only make one artifact per patch. And that's even if you're only aiming for a flower and feather, which most people using the artifact maker probably wouldn't aim for, and it's pretty tough to work around. And number 3, voiced character birthday messages. And by that, I mean voicing the ones that we get from the mail and save in the birthday mail section. I saw Kaching's English VA did this once.
Take care of yourself out there. We'll catch up when you're back in Liyue.
And I gotta say, rather than a mini quest or something like that, I think having this is more than enough, and it just hits better for some reason. The rest of these miscellaneous features I can just list out before we move on. That being 1, more songs and load in our Serenity pot, 2, permanent dark mode loading screens, 3, constellation toggling, and of course, what everyone should want and should always ask for, being able to pet the goddamn cats and dogs. I know that cat petting in the teapot is available, but what about the dogs? And what about doing it in the overworld? Someone even wants to pet the gators once? I don't know about that, but I ain't judging. Now we go into the part where there might be a bit more wishful thinking involved, but screw it, here comes the Gacha Changes section. And of course, I'm starting it off with the Chronicled Wish banner. Honestly, I don't know why this didn't just become a reoccurring banner throughout most, if not all, the versions. I sure as hell thought that it was going to be, only to be surprised that it was gone by the next version. It's a nice way for you to be able to get the much older characters and weapons without having to really wait for a specific time to rerun. Because evidently, some of them just take a long ass time to find their rerun schedule. Though I'm not entirely too sure if having the pity point is that good of an idea, because having to pull for the older things might ask for a bit more of a sacrifice for the more F2P and casual players, since they will have to definitely forgo the incoming limited character if the scheduling is unfortunate for them. But that's really up for debate. I just think that the Chronicled Wish should either stay as a permanent thing or at least show up a bit more often than it does. Maybe rotate the cast of characters and weapons based on the regions whenever it comes along, or just keep it as it is and just put all the older characters there. We're using limited pulls anyway, so the standard banner in itself will still have a reason to exist even if Chronicled Wishes become permanent. Well, scratch that. I just finished watching the live stream and never mind folks. They are going to rotate the Chronicled Wish for 5.32 Liyue characters. Still no mention of making it a bit more permanent though, so we'll just have to wait and see. Other gacha-centric features that has been decently requested revolves around having a better chance at getting the new 4-star characters within a banner. I'd say maybe they can give the new 4-star a better rate up compared to the rest of the pool when we pull a 4-star. Of course, if there isn't any new 4-star in the banner, then they can just give it the usual race as we already have now. A pity counter to look at the individual banner and pull pities just like Zenless's is also a good shout. People also thought of a way to make it so that you can have some sort of a weapon epitomized path thing but for the standard banner, mostly to help people avoid getting a standard character that they already have C6 of and can therefore help them get a better chance of getting other standard banner characters that they either don't have or don't have constellations to or other weapons to boot. Speaking of weapon banner epitomized paths, I also think that the pity points from the weapon banner should carry on to the next patch. Sure, it hurts a lot less now that the path point is reduced to only 1, but it's still a significant amount needed for people to rebuild their pulls on the next weapon banner if they were to start from 0 again. Now, before I go into the last section, which is to review the features that I think is either not that good of an idea or seemingly very unlikely to be applied, I have my own big and very unrealistic suggestion for limited character pulls that I just kinda wanna throw out there just to see what you guys think. I'm thinking that for every first time you get a 5-star in a limited banner, it is guaranteed to be the limited character. And then for every 5-star afterwards, the 50-50 system will kick in. My thought process is that this will certainly be a lot more F2P friendly and it shouldn't be that detrimental to sales because whales would more than likely just buy pulls anyway, seeing as a lot of them likes to go for constellations. Continuously getting new characters is really what keeps a decent portion of players feel the freshness of the game. And I think sacrificing that little bit of sales to prevent the many F2P and casual players who would be dispirited when they don't get their characters, especially when they cannot afford to spend in the game in the first place, would be something that could be more beneficial in the long term. But like I said, all of this is just super duper wishful thinking, just being dreamy and highly unrealistic. Just like the nature of some of the features that I'm going to blast through in our last section, which are the features that are either highly unlikely to actually be implemented or would take a super long time to be implemented if Hoyo is indeed working on it. Ready? Let's go. Full dub lip sync. This utilizes AI and is generally placed in the base coding of the game, so if they want to add this, it's gonna take quite a long while and a bit of time resource. Picking which sets to get in artifact domain. Probably never going to happen. 99% of gacha games with equipment RNG like Genshin does this 2 equipment and 1 domain thing. It's kinda industry standard at this point. Keeping old events or replaying old events for us to play in the game right now. Unless they can quickly figure out the space constraints, then this will remain unlikely for Genshin. Remember, still a mobile game first and foremost. Having your save data playable across all servers. Very, very unlikely to change due to industry standards as well. Plus, maybe it is weird to do with the way they do their servers in real world. Free camera in photo mode. As much as I also want this, literally all their other current main games also have a locked camera mode. Ironically enough, Genshin seems to be the closest it could be to free cam, so probably unlikely as of anytime soon. Infinite stamina outside of combat. Not a good idea. Even your normal run-of-the-mill full open world game normally has stamina by default for exploration, and Genshin is just doing it how it usually is. Having increased stamina outside of combat is something I can look at though. Meaning that we would have current stamina for combat and more stamina upgrade from statue blessings will just be for exploration. More skins and faster skin releases. Model and skin QA for an open world game like Genshin takes a bitchingly long time to do. So just be patient, or you'll be seeing skins that melt into the ground for no reason. Food usage in Abyss. No. Remove resin requirement. Huh? And that's about all I can see and think of that I think is a bit more within the realistic reach of the players' expectations from the features we can hope to see from Genshin come 2025. 5.3 is shaping to be another cool Lantern Ride storyline, though I'm mostly interested in seeing how our OG Geo parents would finally interact for the first time in 4 years of this game's story. But the Hu Tao skin also looks really beautiful, and I think it's about time we finally get to see a different side to her occupation, which seems to be the theme of this next year's Lantern Ride. Damn, it's so weird to say that. 2025 really jumped out of nowhere, huh? Thank you for giving this a watch. Leave a like if you did enjoy it, and feel free to also leave your thoughts in the comments down below. For those of you who are pulling for any of the 5.3 banners, I wish you all the best of luck. And for those of you who are saving your asses, then I wish you a fruitful saving endeavor. Until the next video, the name's Leafy, and I'll see you all next time. Sayonara.